Hey there people, today I'm going to change the rear tire on the Honda Elite 80 scooter. The reason being is the stock tires are garbage and the rear one is just terrible on this thing, and I want to replace it before I get into an accident when a tire blows or something. Anyways, I couldn't do the repair lately because it's been so hot, but since it's nice out, I'm taking advantage of the cool weather now. And I was going to do this job outside, but I found some room in the garage, or I made some room, and I got enough room in here to work. And plus it's a lot safer in the garage. I don't have to worry about some kid tipping it over in the yard. So anyway, the first thing you got to do is remove the center panel here. And you do that by loosening up the screw, loosening and removing it right here. And you just pry the body panel off slowly. It's a pretty easy job. Okay. Don't worry about the carpet on the bottom. Here you go. Here's the center panel. And I guess I could take this hand screw and put it back in its hole. Thread it back in its hole like this. So that way I don't have to lose it. And the next thing I got to do is lift up the seat. And I'll do that with my keys here. Here you go. Seat is lifted up. Now I gotta loosen up this screw and remove it on the rear brake light. This center screw right here. The center brake light screw has been loosened and removed. I set it aside right there. Now it's time to pry off the side body panel. And you just pry it off slowly. Do it slowly, otherwise it'll crack. Right here. Here's the side body panel. You set it aside or in a place where it doesn't get broken or stepped on. Now it's time to start removing the exhaust to engine flange nuts. Just before I loosen and remove the exhaust to engine flange nuts, I got to remove this bolt here for the crankcase ventilation valve, because the crankcase ventilation valve gets in the way of a socket extension or something. So I'm going to use a 10mm socket, a deep well one with a 1/4 inch ratchet. And I'll loosen and remove it. Okay. Got it. Set it aside. And this crankcase ventilation valve, it just shakes around. It's got a flange or a mounting bracket on it with a screw hole inside, or a bolt hole, and it just shakes around. Now it's time to remove the engine to exhaust flange nuts. Now it's time to remove the exhaust to engine flange nuts. If you don't know what those are, they're chrome nuts. There's one on each side that hold the exhaust or muffler onto the engine. And in order to remove those, I'm going to use a couple 3/8 inch extensions, as you see here, along with a 10mm deep well socket. And I'll just shove it down in there to remove the first one, and it's already on there. And I'll take my ratchet, my 3/8 inch ratchet, and just, surprisingly, they're pretty easy to remove. And I'll take that off right there, and I'll loosen it up with my hand. And I'll tip it up so that way it doesn't drop, and voila, there's the nut. Now I gotta remove the other one. And I'll shove it down in there. Got it. Wow, pretty easy. And I remove the ratchet. Do that right there. And I'll just loosen it up without the ratchet like this. And I'll tip the extensions up and the socket, and voila, there you go. Now I got to remove the muffler or exhaust bolts. In order to remove the muffler bolts or exhaust bolts, I'm going to start off with the rear ones, the very rear ones, which are above the muffler that attach themselves to the rear fender. And I'm going to remove those with a 1/4 inch ratchet and a 10mm deep well socket. You could remove the other body panel and loosen them from the other side, but I don't think it's necessary. Yeah, you just loosen them like this. Loosen them like this and set them aside. Do the same thing with the other bolt. Set that one aside. Now it's time to remove the center mounting bolts for the muffler exhaust. Please make note that I made this little bolt map out of cardboard, scrap cardboard, so that way all the bolts will go in the proper place when I reassemble the scooter exhaust or the scooter. Like here's the brake light screw, I marked it. Here's the crankcase ventilation valve bolt. Here's the upper tube muffler mounting bolts. Here's the muffler, and here's where the remainder of the bolts for the exhaust are going to go into. I punched these holes and I marked them with little squares. And I gotta start removing the main exhaust bolts or muffler bolts. And I'm gonna start off with this top one here, which is next to the muffler. And all the bolts are the same heads. It's a 12mm socket I'm gonna use to remove them, along with these 2 socket extensions. And of course, a 3/8 inch ratchet. That was easy. This bolt has a bushing, and I'll just punch it in the hole. Right there, perfect. Now the next bolt, wherever it is. Okay, right there. At least I think it's right there. It's above the kickstand right there. Grab it. Now let's use the extension just to remove it. Put it there. Loosen it up by hand. This bolt has a bushing too, and that one goes in a hole right there. And I guess I could remove the exhaust now. And it should pry right off. Oh yeah, I forgot that bolt on the bottom there. I seen it, then I forgot about it, then I discovered it because I couldn't get the exhaust off. And I'll set the camera down. There. Let's take the ratchet off. It's kind of useless. Oh yeah, I seen the exhaust or muffler just sag, so that way it's all loosened. and I'll put the bolt in the hole. Yeah, I got all the bolts, so that way they will go on the proper places. Now I could remove the muffler. So I'll set the camera down and here's the exhaust or muffler. Now I got to remove the rear mounting bolt or the nut for the rear wheel. And before I remove the rear wheel nut, I'm going to set the rear parking brake so the rear wheel won't move when I'm trying to remove the nut. And in order to do that, I squeeze the rear brake lever like this, and I pull this piece of metal towards me until the handle locks, like this. So that way the rear wheel won't move when you're trying to remove the nut. And in order to remove the rear wheel nut, I'm going to use this electric impact wrench with a 15/16 inch deep well socket, impact socket. And I'll set the camera down right here. And I got my impact wrench. Move the camera so you'll see me. Okay, ready? Simple as pie. I gotta remove the washer too. I'll set those aside. And I guess the rear wheel is supposed to pull right off. I guess so. I guess I gotta do a little persuasion on it with the hammer. Well, I had a brain fart. When I was trying to remove the rear wheel with my hands, I forgot to release the rear parking brake. And in order to do that, I just squeeze the rear lever like this. It's released. And I'll set the camera down and hopefully this dumb wheel will come off. Perfect. Here's the wheel. And here's the rear brake shoes. And here's the rear tire and wheel assembly. I'm going to take this to a motorcycle shop to have the tire removed and the new one installed, because if I tried to do it myself, I'd bend the shit out of the rim. And as you see here, this tire is pretty shot. It's not so bad. There's no belt showing in it or anything, but eventually there would have been. And yes, the rear wheel assembly's been removed. And stay tuned for the reassembly when I get the rear tire mounted to the rear wheel.